Hello, I'm Sue with Woman of Noble Character, and I am delighted to have with us here today writer, filmmaker, blogger, speaker, and all around amazingly talented woman, Sharon Wilharm. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Susan.
I'm so
I'm
happy to have
excited to
you.
be talking today.
I'm so happy to have you here. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you, your career, your life?
Okay, well, first off, I call myself an accidental filmmaker. Growing up, I was a bookworm, and I really didn't have any interest in movies. We would watch the Sunday Disney movies, that came on at Sunday night. That was the extent of my movies. And I always thought I was going into ministry. And I figured I'd marry a preacher or I'd go into, be a missionary or whatever. But then God brought a businessman to my life and made it very clear that this is who I was supposed to marry. And I remember walking down the aisle feeling so confused, going, God, I don't get it. I'm supposed to be, going into ministry. I'm supposed to be a missionary, and I am marrying a man who owns coin laundromats. This makes no sense whatsoever. What I didn't really realize at the time is that, well, I knew he had majored in broadcast communications and he had never done anything with it. And I didn't really realize that he had a dream for making movies. And so in 1999, he started working on a documentary about, we had just moved to this really quaint little small historic town. We lived in a historic house, and he thought it would be really cool to make a documentary about this town. And I don't know exactly, neither one of us really remembers exactly how it happened, but somehow or another, his little documentary turned into a faith-based film with me writing, directing, and starring in it.
Ah,
And I had no clue what I was doing. It was bad. It was really bad. But, we learned a lot. And, I said, I'll never do it again. And then later on, God said, yes, we're going to try it again. But this time, why don't you maybe study and learn something and do
right.
it well? And so that's how I fell into filmmaking.
And there's your ministry, just maybe not in the form that you had anticipated or dreamed about.
It really is. At some point, our last movie, Providence, our last two movies were little silent movies. Now, it's so funny that God took somebody who wanted to speak to the world and had to make two silent movies. And those silent movies have really reached farther than anything else we've done. They've screened all over the world. Providence was at AMC in Times Square and in LA. And at some point, as we were traveling around the country with this movie, and I'm standing up there speaking to this large crowd of people about the movie, and it hits me. Wait a second, this is what God called me to do. And he's taking my movies to places that I would have never gone. And he's speaking to people that I would have never met. And so it's interesting the way God, he did that.
It's amazing. I've talked about this with my audience a lot, but, we know where we think our dreams are taking us. And when God closes the door, we feel derailed or discouraged. But that's when we really need to take hold of our faith, because he has something much greater in mind than we could have ever imagined.
It's
So,
funny you should say that, because literally my senior year in college, we were at a BCM conference, and there was a speaker that was just really powerful and had a call of, if you feel God calling, you into the ministry or whatever. And several of my friends went forward, and I remember sitting there and I could hear God calling me to do something, but at the same time, I could hear him saying, what you're going to do, you have no clue even exists. And I was thinking, what does that even mean?
oh, that's great. Why don't you share with our audience a little bit about your story of faith or your testimony?
Well, my parents were very strong Christians, so I grew up in the church. I was one of those cradle roll, babies from the very beginning. When I was 7 years old, I remember we had just come home from our church had the Lord's Supper. And I guess I guess that was the first time I'd ever really paid any attention to it or given it any thought. And we were driving home. It was just me and my mother. I'm not sure where my sister or my dad were, because I just remember it was the two of us. And I was asking her, I'm like, so what does that mean? Why do people do that? And so my mother pulled over, and she just went through the plan of salvation, and right there on the road, that was my
Aw,
turning point.
at 7 years old, that's wonderful. So you've grown up in the church and grown up knowing God. That's wonderful. Everybody has a different story, and each one just so special to how He called us to be His.
Exactly.
So you talked a little bit about this a few moments ago, but um, when did you begin writing? Did you write when you were younger, maybe um, through school, and then pick it back up after the documentary was presented to you by your husband, or was that something brand new to you?
Well, actually, when I was in school, I loved writing, very much so. But when I was in high school, I was in the advanced English class, and we had just some really brilliant, students in there. I was not the brilliant one. I was in the advanced class, but at the low end of it. And we had this teacher, she wanted us to all write like John Steinbeck, and my goal was to write like Irma Bombeck. And so, I have a very simplistic kind of style. I'm not flowery. I don't use a lot of words when I write. And she would literally have us doing these exercises where we had to average 25 words in a sentence. And I couldn't do that because I'm just, I just write how it is. And so with her, I just figured I'm not very good at writing. And so I didn't do anything with it. And then when I was pregnant, I had morning sickness for 9 months. I was sick the entire time. And so my mother-in-law was a writer, and she said, maybe since you can't do anything else, maybe you should start writing. And so I did, and I was writing for magazines, journalism. And I discovered, I'm good at journalism because, you don't have to use a whole lot of words.
Right.
They want you to be very brief. And so I was writing for Christian magazines, and I started writing for our local newspaper, doing a little neighbors column. And, I really liked journalism. But until we'd written the movie, that was the first time I'd ever written fiction. I was completely a nonfiction writer.
That's great. And it has continued, and you continue to write. You write, of course, screenplays now.
Yes.
And you continue to blog.
Yes.
As well as speaking at conferences.
Yes.
Do you do any other form of writing? Are you still writing for magazines? Have you written books?
Although my desire is that Summer of '67 is our last movie. We have both agreed that, that part of our life we're, putting behind and moving on. And I really want to write novels. Okay. And so all these years, and it's going to be a transition because, screenwriting is kind of like journalism. It's very few words, but I've always wanted to write a novel, and I've written several that I never really did anything with. So I've started, I've got my ideas and an outline, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's exciting. That's exciting. So let's talk about Summer of '67.
Okay.
Give us a quick overview of the film.
Well, it is a Vietnam War love story, and it is based on real events. My dad was aboard the USS Forrestal when it caught fire. And growing up, I would hear my parents, they didn't talk a lot about it. It was, kind of like I knew something bad had happened, And then at some point I learned the story of, about the USS Forrestal catching on fire. My dad was on it. And that, I think it was like 134 men that were killed. But what really struck me is, as I started thinking about it, is first, how different my life would have been if my dad had been one of those, because I was a baby, and, my mom would have been a single mom raising this,
right,
by herself. And so I was like, I just can't comprehend that. And then also, what must it have been like? Because it was 3 days. They heard the news that there was a USS Forrestal fire, but it was 3 days before they knew whether their men were alive or dead. And so it's like, what must it have been like to be watching the news, hear about this event, and wonder, whether right. alive or dead. And so that was the basis of the story. And so I wanted to share, I look around now, and, we have all this turmoil, the protests, all this stuff that's going on. And I think, God, what is happening to our society? But then I would look back and say, you know what? Our country has been through turbulent times
Right.
before, in the 60s. And so I was like, what if I could take the 60s and show people, kind of give them a glimpse of the turmoil and see that throughout it, God was there and God is still with us now. So.
Absolutely. And that is so true. We look at our times now and we think, oh, it's just awful. And I often wonder why God doesn't just say, like he did back during Noah's time or during Sodom and Gomorrah, and say, I'm done with this. We're wiping you out. We're starting all over again. So we can look back and see throughout history there have been tough times. And he's always been there. He's remained faithful. Although I still wonder why he hasn't just thrown in the towel on us all sometimes.
I agree.
So, what was your favorite part of filming this movie? You have an amazing cast and a beautiful story, and I'd love to hear your experience on filming it. What was your favorite part?
Well, my favorite part is always meeting the people. We pray over every single cast member and crew member. And it was kind of interesting this time because this is our 7th film. And so we've met a lot of people in the industry. We have a lot of connections. We like to, people, you like to cast them, you like to work with them. And when I was writing the script and I would, this part, I would kind of picture this person and this part and this person. And as I was writing, I kept hearing God say, you don't know who's going to be in this movie. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to cast this person in this part. And the more I worked on it, finally, I'm like, I think that we need to just cast fresh, because I was like, it's so easy to try. I like this person, so I'm going to cast them. They may not be the best person for this part, but I really like him and I want to work with him. So, and I was like, it's very hard because people get their feelings hurt. Why didn't you cast me for this part? You're my friend, So finally I told Brett and Brittany, because our daughter was handling the casting. And I said, I really feel like God is saying we need to just cast all new people in this. And my husband's like, well, that's kind of weird, but if that's what you feel, I'm fine with that. And my daughter said, that's funny, you should say that, because I've kind of been feeling the same way. Huh. And so when we started casting, we decided that we weren't going to cast anybody until we were all in agreement with me, my husband, Brittany, and her husband, Clay. If one of us didn't think this one was right for the part, we would not cast them. And so, it was kind of interesting. And we had people we knew audition. We didn't tell anybody, and we wanted to give them a fair shot. But when it was all said and done, we realized that we had cast every single speaking part, every part that, had a name or whatever, had been cast with a completely new person. And then we made it open to the other people that we knew, like, hey, if you want to, be a hippie, if you want to be at the wedding or whatever, we'd love to have you join us. So it was kind of nervous. Like, here we're working with all these people, all complete strangers, and it was really amazing. I think a film family is very important, so I work really hard to help the cast to get to know each other. I create a private Facebook group and really get everybody together, introducing themselves. And so, socializing ahead of time so that when we get on set, everybody feels like longtime friends.
And it seems that they are. I just saw that a couple of the actresses shared coffee the other day. It's been a long time since the film has been
It's been
completed,
a year.
But yet there they are, and they've apparently become lifelong friends, so I think you've done a great job with that. One thing that I really love about the film is that there are plenty of movies out there that show the Vietnam War and either the political part of it or the war part of it, with just a few glimpses of what's happening back home. But this film really focuses on the other side of war, those that are left at home, and the devastating impacts and fears and daily struggles that the women who are left at home went through. And that continues to happen today when we have military that are serving. The women tend to be women, not always, are at home. And I love that you brought a new perspective to that. So allowed us to see that era in a very different light than what we're used to. So, oh,
That's exactly. And I was really nervous writing it because, like I'm writing about a time period that I don't, I was there as a baby. I don't remember it, So I was having to depend on, talking to people. And I interviewed just as many of the men that went away and the women, like, how did you feel, and I loved hearing all these different stories of people. I had some that were like young, they remembered their brother going away, or some that, I heard, from the sisters or the, like the wife or the, I wanted to get all that perspective. And it's been really cool because I was really nervous when I had people that were in the military that were there, when they were watching the movie. I'm like, what are they going to say? Did I get it? And every single person has said, you captured it, you got it. And it's been kind of cool too, because like, I was like, I want it to be healing for them, because I feel like so many of the Vietnam War movies, I think they make it more traumatic for the veterans.
They do because it makes good cinema, but it's particularly those with PTSD and things like that, where they're hearing sounds and sights that bring everything back, which it may be true to what happened during that period, but it is so incredibly traumatic for those that went through it.
And so that was my goal, is that it would be soothing and it would show them honor and respect. And that's what I've heard so far, is that this was nice. This brought back memory. It helped me relive it, but it helped give me closure, so that's been nice to hear.
Now, this is a little departure from your normal type of film that is overtly faith-based.
Yes.
So tell me how that came about and why you've taken a step from the specifically faith-based film, the one that, while it has faith overtures, is not overtly faith-based.
Well, my husband and I, we both grew up in church, and we are both we don't know any life other than, the Christian life. Mm-hmm. And so it never occurred to us when we started making movies, we assumed we had to make for the Christian audience, because we're like, there's nothing we can say that's going to appeal to a secular crowd. They're going to just kind of look at us and say, ha ha, you're all, just whatever. And so then when we did Providence, which was a very, very simple faith-based love story that was silent, so I mean, you could not pick a more specialized, unlikely to reach a large crowd of people movie. And when we were making it, I was like, God, why are we even doing this? Does anybody even care about this? But surprisingly, it got into AMC Independent. And then when I was asking around, as soon as I found out we were going to get an AMC, they said you could, pick which theaters you want to submit to, and then each theater decides whether or not they'll show your movie. So I get on Facebook and I'm asking everybody, which theaters should we try to get in? Well, we're in Tennessee. There was no AMCs in Tennessee. But one of our actors, Rich Engel, lives in New York City, and he says, you need to try for the AMC Empire. It's at Times Square. And I'm like, yeah, right, Rich. No, seriously, people, which theater should we be trying to get into? And he said, no, I want you to try to get into that one. So we did, and it was one of the first theaters that accepted us. And then we found out why. Because like 8 or 10 years ago, Rich had moved with his wife to Manhattan, and they had gone to this theater. And as he was going down the escalator, because this is how big that theater is, he had prayed, Lord, someday let me be coming out of this theater after having watched a movie that I was in. And at that time, he had never been in a movie. He was a stage actor. He traveled around doing a one-man show, but he started doing movies. He was in Beyond the Mask, which was, a big budget movie. He was in Alone Yet Not Alone, which was nominated for an Oscar. Neither of those showed in that theater. Ours, where he had a lead part, was the first one that made it into the AMC Empire. And so it was kind of unusual, but what we discovered is the New York City critics were kind to us. And we discovered that there was a lot of people, we had all these secular critics and stuff that said, I'm not a Christian, but I like this movie.
Huh.
And so then we're like, you know what? Maybe we can speak
Mm-hmm.
to non-Christians. But we had decided that Providence was going to be our last movie. We're like, this is, what more could we want? This is pretty cool. And then we went to the ICBM Crown Awards. And this is like the industry awards. And so we submitted, but we had no hope of, getting anything. We're just like, that'd be kind of cool if we got nominated for an award. That'd be kind of neat. And then we were nominated for 4. And so we were just like, and one of them was Best Picture. And then when we saw who we were competing against, and literally we were there with Beyond the Mask and War Room, and we're just like, oh God, this is just crazy. Why would you have us? So we're like, we're going to go to the awards ceremony and we're just going to have a great time. It's not like we're going to win, we're just going to enjoy ourselves. And so, like, people say, like, I don't pray to win awards, because I was like, we don't need these awards. We've had all these awards. I just pray, God, you know who needs the awards tonight. Just whoever needs it, make sure they get it, And that was sincerely, we went home with 4 awards, including 3rd place for Best Picture. And we went home and we were like, okay, God, what are you trying to tell us? If I said who needs it most, we're like, maybe we need one more movie. Maybe try to say you're supposed to still be doing this. And so we're like, if we're going to do it, we're going to make it an evangelistic, reaching out to secular. We're not going to go for the faith-based crowd. We're going to just. And so it was kind of interesting with our cast. Like when we were casting, we called it a faith-based because we didn't want people to get the wrong idea. But then we told the cast, we're like, we are not going to market it as a faith-based film. We are marketing it as a Vietnam War love story. And so it's kind of hard because, we're playing, I feel like at times we're in our little floaties in the ocean and there's all these cruise ships around us, But I feel like that's where God has put us at this point. So it'll be interesting.
So you've already said that this was your last movie, and
Yes.
you're saying it again. So
This is how I mean it.
maybe we should just wait and see where God leads you here.
I think we've concluded.
Did you learn any lessons from writing or making the film? Any life lessons that you've taken away from the process?
Well, I knew, like, writing this movie was not easy, just because how do you write about God being there through life's, like, worst tragedies? Like, how do you write about that and not experience it yourself? And so, like, I was so afraid, because the whole time I was writing, I'm like, something bad's going to happen. Something bad is going to happen. I just know it. I can't write about this. And so I worried about it. And I just didn't know what to expect. We have over 100-person prayer team on Facebook that I had accumulated people that I'm like, we're going to start praying from, while I was writing and praying through all that. And it's a really good thing because we just had one thing after another that happened. We had, with Rachel, 3 weeks before filming, finding out she had breast cancer. And it's like, okay, this is our lead actress. She's in like most of the scenes. How do we deal with this? But it's like, no, we prayed over it. God's going to see us through. We had another actor whose young wife died unexpectedly. We had 2 of our supporting actors, the dad and the aunt. They both have MS, so they had all kinds of health issues and things that we were working around. We had an actress on a kidney transplant list while she was there, waiting to get a transplant. It was just one thing after another. God was there throughout the whole thing. Whatever happened, God was there and he saw us through it. And it was just like the movie.
It just, when you were saying that, you had a team praying over it, and one of the goals for the movie was to reach those who weren't Christian.
Yes.
To show them that God was there. My husband and I recently did the 40-day prayer challenge. And one of the things in the introduction, the author, Mark Batterson, says, Satan's going to attack you during this process. It's going to happen. And that's the first thing I thought of when, here you are trying to reach, um, the non-Christian audience, and Satan doesn't like that. So he was certainly attacking, but again, it just shows God's providence, and he keeps his promises, and he never leaves us. So that's a great lesson right there. What's
Yes.
one takeaway that you hope people have from this film?
I hope that they will take away that there's always hope. No matter what happens, that God hasn't abandoned them, that he is still there. It's not too late to turn around, that I just hope that people leave with a feeling of peace and hope.
And I think they do. So what's next for you? You said, okay, no more movies, and you have a couple novels on your heart. So what happens now for you?
Well, we will probably spend a good year just marketing and promoting this movie. We'll be doing screenings. We decided to, rather than trying to pack everything in a short, everything's happening at once, we are spreading it out. And so we'll be doing screenings around the country and film festivals through Veterans Day. We'll really be concentrating. And then come next spring, we'll, start a whole new line of traveling around. And I would just absolutely love to do like women's retreats where I'm speaking to the women and sharing with them, and then using the movie as a, like kind of a closure to put it all together. So that's in addition to the novel, that's what I really want to do, is travel around and speak.
That's exciting. Before we get into the fun tidbits, I always like to ask, how can we pray for you? We have amazing prayer warriors that are part of our Women of Noble Character family. So how can we pray for you?
Pray for the people who will be seeing the movie, like praying that God will prepare their hearts. And, it's also praying for each person involved, because when you get reviews, some reviews are mean, and some things that people post on YouTube, and stuff like that. People can be cruel. I've learned not to take it personally, especially people that'll see, like a little snippet, or they'll see the trailer and they'll make all these judgments, and it's like, they don't know. And, they're just kind of trolls, but it's hard, and I worry about, when critics criticize the actors, and they will, because they all, everybody that's critics criticize. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard. We've got a lot of actors who they're new to the industry, and, I don't want to destroy, I don't want them to feel like there's something wrong with them when they're not, because they did a fabulous, fabulous job.
They did.
And I want to know that.
They did. You have an incredibly talented cast. So. Okay, well, we will certainly keep everyone who is touched by this movie in any way, shape, or form in our prayers. So we're going to wrap up with some fun tidbits just to get to know you a little bit better. And you don't need to put too much thought to this. So the first thing that comes to your mind, what would you say is your favorite Bible verse at this stage of your life?
I guess wait on the Lord. All the different wait on the Lord's, because I keep telling God what I want to do, and he keeps saying, So, yeah. Which
That's
is not a verse. There's like a bunch of different ones.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a tough question, because I know most of us have many different favorites, and it sometimes depends on our current season of life, but sometimes he's speaking certain ones a little louder than others to us.
The wait on the Lord seemed to be the one.
What's one television show you just can't miss?
We only watch old shows, but my favorite show recently is Monk. We discovered Monk just this past year, and binge watched the entire season. But or the whole series. I wish it had gone on farther, because I just love that show.
We do too. Both my husband and I met. We met after that show went off the air. And that's one of those things when we're away with our RV and we've got our Netflix looking for something, we always go back to Monk.
I love Monk.
Um, what is a book you're currently reading or a book you've recently read that's had an impact on you?
Well, I've been reading quite a few Tamara Alexander books, and I really like. She's a historical fiction writer, and she lives here in Nashville as well. And I love that she has a whole series that, like, she has some that take place in Belmont, which is one of our all the different plantation houses, all the different historic districts. She has different series about them. And so I just finished one, which I don't remember the title. It was something about music,
Uh-huh.
but I just love her books because that's what I'm trying to do with my novel is I love historical fiction.
That
And
is my favorite genre. I'm currently reading one right now. It's historical fiction. It's particularly faith-based historical.
yes, oh, of course, yes.
Awesome. So, coffee or tea?
I don't like either. I like Dr. Pepper.
I don't think I've ever had anybody answer that question that way. Usually, they're strongly one way or the other.
I really don't like coffee or tea, but
How
I
about
like
that?
tea a little better than coffee.
I don't drink soda at all. But if I absolutely have to, if there's no other choice, Dr. Pepper is what I get. Favorite snack food?
Nuts, either boiled peanuts or cashews, some kind of nuts.
Okay, good answer to get your protein there too and your salt. But dream vacation.
We love just going to small towns, like, maybe 4 or 5 hours away that have antique districts and historic homes. And my favorite, that's just picking some random town that nobody else ever goes to. And antiquing is my dream vacation.
Well, if you've not been up to Missouri yet, we are chock full of tiny little towns and chock full of antique stores. We'll do that sometimes at a weekend. Just say, okay, let's go and pick a direction, and you're sure to stumble across something
That's
really
what we
cool.
do. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, I thank you so much for spending the time with us today. We'll be sure to include all the links so everyone can find out more about the movie and where to find it that may be screening near them, and be able to follow the cast and crew on social media to see what's next, and particularly to find out when this new novel comes to be, whenever God's timing makes that happen. So I thank you so much for your time, and wish you all the best. And we will keep you, the cast, the crew, and the viewers in our prayers.
Well, thank you. It's been fun.